Margaret had banked at the very same institution for 31 years. The same branch, the same teller window on Tuesdays, the same savings account she'd fed with every paycheck since back when her husband was still living. And one afternoon during the autumn of last year, she stepped inside to handle something entirely ordinary, something she had done dozens of times in the past. And the bank refused her, not rudely, courteously even. A manager got summoned, paperwork appeared, and Margaret walked out of that branch with her task unfinished, her money untouched, and a queasy feeling she couldn't put into words. Here's what makes her story worth your attention. She wasn't attempting to do anything improper. She wasn't being defrauded. She wasn't bewildered. She was trying to handle her own money, money she had earned, set aside, and deposited into that institution across 3 decades. And the bank had quietly developed an internal rule that abruptly made what she was attempting complicated. And here's what nobody warned her about. And what nobody may have warned you about is that this isn't a one-off. It isn't a single bad branch manager enduring a rough Tuesday. There is a sweeping, accelerating change unfolding inside financial institutions right now, aimed specifically at customers above the age of 65. And the people most apt to be caught off guard by it are the ones who have done everything correctly. So today, I want to dig into that change alongside you. Not to frighten you, not to send you racing to shut your accounts, but because the particular mistake that snares seniors in this, the one that transforms a routine errand into a bureaucratic barrier, is nearly always identical, and it is nearly always avoidable. Let's discover what it truly is. Here's the question I kept circling back to when I began tugging on this thread. Why now? Banks have served elderly customers for generations. They've managed retirement accounts, social security deposits, estate transactions, the whole lot, without this degree of friction. So why heading into 2026 are grievances from seniors regarding unexpected banking restrictions climbing sharply? The answer begins somewhere most people would never imagine to look: elder financial protection legislation. Across the past several years, federal regulators and state lawmakers have pressed hard to shield older Americans from financial exploitation. The figures that fueled that effort are genuinely disturbing. Fraud targeting adults beyond 65 has cost billions every year. And in numerous cases, the bank was the final place where somebody could have stepped in and halted the loss. So lawmakers essentially told financial institutions, if you notice something resembling exploitation, you possess not merely the right, but potentially the duty to step in. That sounds protective. And it is in theory. The trouble is what unfolds when banks convert that duty into internal policy. Because banks aren't social workers. They're not built to investigate every unusual transaction case by case with nuance and context. What they are built to do is construct rule systems, flag thresholds, automated tripwires, checklists that produce alerts when certain patterns surface, and some of those tripwires have been calibrated at levels that snag entirely normal, entirely legal senior financial behavior. A sizable cash withdrawal, a wire transfer to a relative, attaching a name to an account, shifting money between accounts in a pattern that doesn't align with the customer's usual profile. Any of these on its own can now prompt a hold, a review, a discussion with a manager, or an outright refusal at institutions that have quietly tightened their internal playbooks. The customer never receives a memo. There's no FAQ posted on the website. The policy shifts, and you only learn about it when you're standing at a counter suddenly forced to prove that your own financial choice is legitimate. That's what befell Margaret, and it occurs every single day. But here's where it turns intriguing, because the seniors who glide through these new friction points, they're not necessarily richer. They're not necessarily relying on private banking or enjoying some special relationship. They're doing one particular thing differently, and we'll arrive at exactly what that is. First, though, I want to reveal to you how deep this rabbit hole genuinely goes. To grasp why certain transactions are being flagged, you have to grasp how a bank's compliance department views risk. They're not considering you as an individual. That's not a knock. It's simply the reality of how large institutions function. They're considering populations, patterns, statistical anomalies. Their task is to pinpoint transactions that match the profile of exploitation or fraud, and to accomplish that across millions of accounts at once. So they assemble what's known as a behavioral baseline for each customer. It's basically a financial fingerprint. Your usual deposit amounts, accounts, your typical withdrawal size, how frequently you visit the branch versus online, who you generally transfer money to. Normal variation within that profile, no issue. An abrupt break from it that prompts a review. Now here's where seniors specifically encounter trouble. Retirement is, by its very nature, an enormous behavioral change. Your deposit patterns shift. Perhaps a pension supplants a paycheck, or Social Security begins arriving, or you start drawing from a 401k or IRA methodically. Your transaction size might grow because you're making larger, less frequent purchases, a vacation, a home repair, assisting a grandchild with tuition. You might begin moving money in ways you never did throughout your working years. Each of those shifts can appear to an automated compliance system like a red flag, and it grows more complicated because at the very moment your behavior is legitimately shifting, the types of fraud targeting your age group are likewise rising. Grandparent scams, phony IRS calls, romance fraud, sweepstakes schemes, these are genuine, they are sophisticated, and they frequently involve the victim heading to the bank and making a large withdrawal, sometimes even feeding the teller a story that the criminal rehearsed with them. Banks have watched that movie. They're attempting to halt it, but the side effect is that a legitimately retired person who wishes to withdraw a substantial sum to, say, assist with a grandchild's emergency medical bill or shift money into a different account they've chosen to open or send funds to an adult child they support can get halted at the teller window. And here is the particular mistake that makes this dramatically worse. It's not the transaction itself. It's the documentation situation surrounding the account, or more precisely, the absence of it. Pause. When a bank can't swiftly confirm that a large or unusual transaction is legitimate, when there's no authorized signatory on the account, no power of attorney on file, no trusted contact designation, no established pattern of communication with a relative or advisor, the path of least resistance for a compliance-minded institution is to slow everything down or stop it altogether. The customers who don't get halted are nearly always the ones who have already constructed what I'd call a credibility infrastructure around their accounts. It's not complicated, but most people have never been informed they require it, and that is the mistake we're here to remedy. Let me be precise about what that mistake resembles because it arrives in a few distinct forms. Mistake 1. The solo account with no documentation of intent. This is the most widespread. A senior holds one or two bank accounts, perhaps a checking, perhaps a savings, kept solely in their own name with no power of attorney on file with the institution, no trusted contact named, and no beneficiary designations refreshed in years. The account is legally theirs. They have every right to it. But from the bank's vantage point, if something appears unusual, there's nobody to phone for context. There's no pre-arranged relationship with an advisor or a relative. There's no paper trail demonstrating that this customer in advance authorized this kind of transaction. When a compliance flag fires, the bank's choices are approve it regardless. Risk, hold it, friction or decline, safety. More and more institutions are selecting friction or safety. Mistake 2. Conducting large transactions without a conversation first. Banks have grown far more at ease stepping in when large sums are at stake and far less at ease moving quickly without a clear narrative. The seniors who dodge this grasp something important. Phoning ahead or sending a short written instruction to the branch before a big transaction alters how it's processed. It converts a surprise into an expectation. Compliance teams react very differently to a flagged transaction that's already been talked over with the branch manager versus one that surfaces without context. This sounds like extra effort, and it is slightly, but the alternative is showing up, attempting to move a significant sum, and being told you must return in 3 business days following a review or that additional verification is needed that you didn't bring along. Mistake 3, no trusted contact designation. This is the one that most people have honestly never heard of. In 2018, financial industry regulators rolled out a requirement for brokerage firms, and many banks adopted it voluntarily to request that customers name a trusted contact. This is not the same as a beneficiary. It's not the same as a joint account holder. It's merely a person the institution is permitted to phone if they harbor concerns about your account activity or your well-being. You govern whether they can phone that person. That person cannot carry out any transactions on your account. They can only be reached for verification. But here's the thing. Customers who have a trusted contact on file get handled differently when a flag fires. There's a human to reach. there's context on hand. The bank can rapidly establish whether you're acting freely and deliberately rather than defaulting to a hold. If your account has no trusted contact named, you've eliminated one of the quickest ways for a bank to settle a compliance question in your favor. 3 mistakes. All of them invisible until the instant they count. And at that instant, they count enormously. Now, I want to draw the camera back a little because there's a second dimension to this story that most people aren't linking. It's not solely internal bank policy. There are regulatory shifts in 2026 that are influencing how specific kinds of transfers are processed, particularly wire transfers and certain A transactions when the account holder is above 65 and the destination is a non-institutional recipient. Here's what that means in plain language. If you are moving money to another bank account, to a relative, to a financial advisor, to a real estate transaction, certain institutions are now imposing enhanced review protocols, specifically owing to the combination of your age bracket and the transfer type. This isn't discrimination in the legal sense. It's classified as elder financial protection under several state-level regulatory frameworks that have taken effect or broadened coverage in 2025 and 2026. The intent again is protective. The execution again has friction built in. One particular area that's producing a great deal of confusion right now: transfers made in connection with estate planning. If you're collaborating with an attorney to establish or fund a trust, if you're retitling assets as part of a Medicaid planning strategy, if you're gifting assets to relatives as part of a legal estate reduction plan, these are all legitimate, common, professionally directed financial activities. They are also activities that can set off elder financial exploitation flags because they involve shifting significant sums, frequently to people the bank has no prior record of receiving your money. The maddening irony is that the people most apt to be doing these things properly, collaborating with attorneys, following professional guidance, acting with full legal authority over their own assets, are sometimes the people most apt to get halted because their transactions appear bigger and less routine than someone who's simply making small, steady withdrawals. The workaround, and there is one, involves something called an attorney letter of instruction. When your estate planning attorney supplies written communication directly to your financial institution confirming the nature of a planned transaction series, most institutions will create an internal note that clears those transactions for a defined stretch. This one step, which takes your attorney perhaps 15 minutes to produce, can wipe out weeks of friction, holds, and repeated verification requests. Most people never request it. Most attorneys, unless they routinely handle elder law, don't think to offer it automatically. Now, we're reaching the part of the investigation that actually startled me because it's not just what banks are doing. It's what some seniors are inadvertently doing that makes the situation worse. This is the part of the story where I need you to truly pay attention because there's a category of financial behavior that many seniors fall into, not out of carelessness, but out of completely understandable instinct that creates exactly the wrong impression with automated banking systems. It goes like this. A senior realizes that they need to reorganize their finances. Perhaps a health scare sparked it. Perhaps a friend went through probate and it was a nightmare. Perhaps they watched a video, spoke with a sibling, read something, and they conclude, I need to move some things around. I should consolidate. I should simplify. So they begin making a series of moves, closing an old account here, opening a fresh one there, transferring a balance, withdrawing cash to settle a grandchild's tuition directly, moving money into a trust account they just established, making a gift to a relative. These are all reasonable things. These are all things their estate planning attorney might have advised them to do. But here is what it resembles to a bank's compliance algorithm. Multiple account changes in a compressed span, irregular withdrawal amounts, new external transfer destinations, cash withdrawals trailed by online transfers. This pattern, when it shows up in an elderly customer's account history, scores very high on what compliance systems term a behavioral anomaly index, which means that by the time you stroll into the branch to finish step 3 or step 4 of your perfectly legitimate financial reorganization plan, you may already be flagged. The teller doesn't know that. The branch manager may not know that, but somewhere in the institution's back-end system, your account has piled up enough anomaly points that the next unusual transaction could set off a hard stop. This is not a conspiracy. This is not the bank scheming to steal your money or deny you access. It is an automated risk system doing precisely what it was built to do, imperfectly. And the solution is almost embarrassingly simple, but it demands doing something before you start making moves, not after. You inform the bank, not informally, not verbally at the teller window, but in writing a short signed letter, ideally co-signed or referenced by your attorney, that tells the institution. Over the coming 90 days, I am carrying out a planned financial reorganization that will involve the following types of transactions. This activity is intentional, legally directed, and does not represent a change in my circumstances or a reaction to outside pressure. Banks have a process for receiving and recording this kind of notice. It doesn't guarantee frictionless processing, but it dramatically lowers the likelihood of a hard stop. It shifts your account from flagged anomaly to documented intentional activity. The people who know to do this, they tend to be collaborating with elder law specialists, attorneys, and financial advisors who grasp not just the legal moves, but the banking friction that encircles those moves. The people who don't know to do this tend to discover it the hard way in the middle of a transaction they needed to finish yesterday. Let me carry this investigation to its conclusion. Here's what I believe is genuinely happening based on everything I've assembled. We are in the midst of a generational change in how financial institutions engage with older customers. The regulatory pressure is genuine. The fraud problem it's reacting to is genuine, and the resulting friction, the extra review, the documentation requirements, the holds, the courteous but firm branch manager conversations is not disappearing. If anything, the infrastructure for this kind of monitoring is going to grow more sophisticated and more widespread in the coming years. What that means for you isn't panic. It means preparation. Specifically, 5 things you can do right now, most of which take under an hour, that will dramatically shrink your exposure to needless banking friction. Number 1, phone your bank and name a trusted contact today. This single step costs you nothing and hands the bank a path to swiftly settle any compliance question in your favor. Pick someone who knows your financial situation and can be reached dependably. You can revise this designation at any time. Number 2, place a durable power of attorney on file with every financial institution you use, not just with your attorney, not just in your files at home. The institution itself needs a copy on record, and it needs to be accepted and logged by them before you ever require it. Phone ahead and ask what their POA acceptance requirements are because they differ. Number 3, if you are planning any significant financial reorganization, shifting assets, funding a trust, making substantial gifts, tell your bank in writing before you begin. 1 letter, 1 conversation with your branch manager. That context can be the difference between a smooth process and weeks of holds and reviews. Number 4, ask your estate planning attorney for a letter of instruction aimed at your financial institutions. If they're not accustomed to providing this, locate one who is. Elder law attorneys do this routinely and grasp how banking compliance departments operate. Number 5, review your account beneficiary designations now, not when something forces the matter. Outdated beneficiaries, especially following a spouse's passing or a major life change, create confusion that can compound during an estate administration and can sometimes set off identity verification issues while you're still living. None of these require you to switch banks. None of them require you to overhaul your entire financial life. They are documentation moves, small, unglamorous, quiet actions that build the credibility infrastructure I mentioned earlier. The irony of this whole situation is that the seniors who get halted at the bank counter are almost never doing anything wrong. They're managing their money, they're planning for the future, they're doing exactly what responsible people do, but they're doing it in a financial environment that has quietly altered the rules without sending a memo. I want to return to Margaret for a moment. She did eventually untangle her situation. It took 3 visits, 2 phone calls, and a letter from her attorney. The transaction she needed to finish, the one that was completely legal, completely hers to make, ultimately went through. But here's the thing she remarked afterward, and it's the thing that stayed with me. Lower voice. I've been managing my own finances for 60 years, and I walked out of that bank feeling like a suspect. That feeling, that abrupt, disorienting loss of agency is what this is really about. Not just the paperwork, not just the compliance systems. It's the experience of having quietly built a life, gathered resources through decades of discipline, and then finding that the institutions meant to hold those resources have developed new gatekeeping behaviors that you were never warned about. You don't have to accept that as your story. The 5 steps I walked through today won't guarantee that you never run into friction. The systems are imperfect and they will stay imperfect, but they will make you, in the eyes of your financial institution, someone who has already answered the questions before they're asked. And in a world where the questions are being asked more often to more people with higher stakes, that is not a small thing. The mistake isn't moving money. The mistake is moving money inside an institution that has no context for who you are and what you're doing. Change that context before you need it. Beat. That's the investigation. And if it made you think of someone who needed to hear it, someone who might be walking into a bank unprepared for a system that's shifted around them, send this to them. Not because I'm asking you to, because you might just save them 3 trips, 2 phone calls, and a letter from an attorney.